What if I told you your gut bacteria, not your brain, decided when you're hungry or full? Scientists just discovered a bacterial protein that tells your brain to stop eating, even when there's no food at all. This changes everything we thought we knew about hunger. Gut bacteria control appetite without providing nutrition. Researchers have discovered a biological pathway where bacteria proteins directly suppress hunger independent of any nutritional content. The study published in Nature identifies how flagellin, a structural protein from bacterial tails, activates specialized gut cells that communicate with the brain to regulate eating behavior. This represents a fundamental departure from how scientists previously understood appetite control. The neurobiotic sense. Traditional models of hunger focused on nutritional needs and energy deficits. Hormones like ghrelin and nutrient sensing in the gut informed the brain about energy status, prompting eating behavior to restore balance. The new mechanism operates differently. Flagellin binds to toll-like receptor 5, TLR5, on neuropod cells, specialized epithelial cells with projections extending into the gut lumen. These cells act as sensory antennae, detecting microbial components directly. When flagellin contacts TLR5, the neuropod cell releases peptide YY, or PYY, a satiety hormone. This happens within seconds to minutes. PYY then activates the vagus nerve, sending a rapid signal to brain regions controlling appetite. The brain interprets this as fullness, suppressing hunger and reducing food intake. The entire sequence bypasses slower hormonal circulation pathways. Approximately 1/4 of isolated neuropod cells erupted with calcium sparks within seconds of flagellin exposure in laboratory experiments. Researchers termed this the neurobiotic sense, a previously unrecognized sensory pathway for detecting microbial patterns. Independence from nutrition. The most striking experimental evidence came from flagellin enema studies in mice. Okay, I know it's a mice study, but bear with me. Scientists administered purified flagellin directly into the colons of fasted mice. Despite flagellin providing 0 calories or nutrients, treated mice ate significantly less once food was reintroduced compared to control mice. The effect only occurred when both TLR5 and Y2R receptors remained active. Blocking either one prevented appetite suppression. This demonstrates that microbial molecular patterns alone can trigger satiety signals without any involvement of actual food or nutrient intake. The pathway works independently of immune responses, metabolic changes, or the presence of gut microbiota. It functions in germ-free mice and produces no elevated inflammatory cytokines. Genetic deletion of TLR5, specifically in PYY-producing gut cells, caused mice to eat larger meals and gain more weight without showing signs of inflammation or metabolic problems. This indicated disrupted neural signaling rather than immune dysfunction. So, the hormone deficiency model. Clinical research reveals that individuals with obesity, now we're back to human trials here, exhibit approximately 40% lower levels of PYY compared to lean individuals. Studies show baseline PYY levels of 10.2 in obese subjects versus 16.9 in lean subjects, with a statistical significance of P001. That's considered very high in statistics, okay? Fasting PYY levels correlate negatively with body mass index, suggesting PYY deficiency may predispose toward obesity development. This reframes obesity from a willpower issue to a hormonal and biological condition. Many people with obesity have a biological impairment in feeling satiated, making appetite regulation naturally harder. The traditional advice to eat less assumes overeating stems primarily from lack of self-control, and we've been saying that it doesn't. Now we have some real good evidence about why. Recognizing PYY deficiency acknowledges that appetite regulation is disrupted by physiological factors beyond conscious control. Clinical implications point toward treatment strategies focused on restoring or enhancing satiety signaling, rather than solely emphasizing calorie restriction, which doesn't work, by the way. Unlike leptin, to which obese individuals develop resistance, obese subjects retain normal sensitivity to PYY's appetite-suppressing effects. And that's very good. So, PYY infusion reduces caloric intake by 30% in obese subjects and 31% in lean subjects, right? Proving human responsiveness to the satiety hormone. So this is very good. Now, how can you get this without going through some fancy scientific function? There is a protein pathway that can help you. Protein consumption triggers the strongest PYY response among macronutrients. Oh, we're back to protein, guys. And I've been telling you, eat enough protein. Not too much, but eat enough protein. Research demonstrated that PYY levels remain highest at 240 minutes after a high protein breakfast compared to a high fat or high carbohydrate breakfast. Okay? When protein enters the gut, amino acids and protein fragments activate nutrient receptors on neuropod cells and endocrine cells. This sensing triggers PYY secretion into the bloodstream and local neural circuits. Protein digestion also stimulates other satiety-related hormones like GLP-1, enhancing the overall effect. And yes, that is the GLP-1 everyone's talking about. You don't want to take the pharmaceutical version of that. You want something better. Okay? High-protein meals cause a more pronounced rise in PYY levels and greater decline in hunger compared to meals rich in carbohydrates or fats. Carbohydrate ingestion stimulates insulin release and influences other gut hormones, but its effect on PYY is generally less potent. Dietary fats stimulate cholecystostatin, CCK, I've talked about that one before, and other satiety hormones, but their effect on PYY release is moderate and typically less immediate than protein. But, go back there. Remember, if you're eating ketogenic, right, high fat, which are healthy fats, and moderate protein, right, and virtually no carbohydrates, you're activating your PYY levels. This probably helps explain why people who are eating carnivore just absolutely don't feel hungry. Is because they're getting plenty of protein on their carnivore diet, plus healthy fats, which also help release PYY. So guess what? That's why they're not hungry. The mechanistic difference explains why protein-rich diets promote satiety more effectively than other macronutrient compositions. Evolutionary co-development. The TLR5 deletion experiments reveal, and this is in mice, experiments reveal a deeply intertwined evolutionary relationship between hosts and gut bacteria. Okay, so we're getting back into the gut microbiota. Over millions of years, humans and their microbiome co-evolved a sophisticated communication system to regulate vital behaviors like appetite. The gut microbiome signals through TLR5 on neuropod cells to release satiety hormones, informing the brain when to stop eating. Okay, but remember, when we're going back with this, humans were essentially hypercarnivores, right? Before agriculture came into play. So we're getting lots of protein, lots of good high quality fat, which comes with animal protein. So we're getting a lot of that PYY release. We just didn't know the mechanism before. Now we have studies that show the mechanism. This helps maintain energy balance and prevents overeating. By modulating host appetite, microbes influence the nutrient environment, and this is going to be important here. Remember, when you switch to a carnivore diet or to a ketogenic diet, right, which is mostly animal products, your gut microbiome changes to adjust to the change in food. It takes a little bit of time, but it does, which is why we normally suggest if you're eating a standard American diet now that you take a period of time, at least 2 weeks minimum, but maybe up to 6 weeks, to switch over to that carnivore type diet to get your microbiome to adjust with you. But that allows you to take full advantage of all of these hormones and these signaling devices that we're finding now in your gut that helps keep you less hungry. Okay, it works very well. Okay, single cell RNA sequence revealed TLR5 expression increases by 57% from ileum to colon in PYY expressing cells. Okay, so the communication system represents an evolutionary advantage, enabling hosts to tune appetite and metabolism based on microbial signals. Go back to, once again though, remember, until agriculture came into the park, which is, 10,000, maybe 11,000 years ago, we were hypercarnivores anyways, and so this whole thing was evolved around getting animal protein and the subsequent fat as what you're eating. So once again, we knew this effect. We knew that carnivores weren't getting hungry. Now we know part of the reason why. We know the mechanism. This may have been critical for surviving in fluctuating environments. Certainly. The existence of this pathway challenges the notion of the individual as a standalone organism. Humans function as holobionts, complex ecosystem composed of host cells plus trillions of microbes that co-evolved to influence physiology and behavior. Yes, and remember, those microbes in your gut change based upon your diet, and they adjust according to your diet. And so when you start eating a mostly carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet, right, which is almost no carbs, your gut microbiome changes and you stop feeling hungry. Now, we knew that part of it was ghrelin and GLP-1, but it didn't seem to account for the whole thing. Now we have a mechanistic pathway to account for why carnivores just don't get hungry. Clinical translation gaps. Neuropod cells with similar anatomical and functional characteristics have been identified in humans, and TLR5 receptor expression patterns are conserved across species. So, once again, while most of the experiments in this nature research was on mice, there are enough human studies to at least point mechanistically in the same direction. Okay, the human microbiome demonstrably influences behavior and brain function. We know that. Consistent with the concept that microbial signals can modulate neural circuits involved in appetite, and we now have the mechanism for that as well. However, direct experimental evidence on humans showing that flagellin activates TLR5 on neuropod cells to release PYY and suppress appetite remains lacking. We haven't gotten that far yet with humans, but we know it works in mice. We know there are similar functions in humans. And we know, beyond a shadow of doubt, that people who switch to a carnivore diet stop getting hungry. And this is just good evidence to show that this does work. We know, we got the GLP-1. We know we got the ghrelin. But this adds on top of it, just gives us even more evidence for why carnivore is so good as far as a healthy diet for you and keeping you at the proper weight. Right? There are ethical and technical challenges limiting invasive studies. That's why we may never get some of these studies in humans. Okay? The magnitude and variability of this pathway's influence on human appetite and metabolism remain unclear, including how it interacts with other satiety signals and environmental factors. Yeah, we don't have, because we can't cut open human beings to see what's going on, right? But we do know what happens. When you switch to carnivore, you don't get as hungry. We do know some of the mechanisms. We know about, once again, the ghrelin. We know about GLP-1 and some of the other things. Well, it just didn't seem to be enough to account for the fact that carnivores just weren't getting hungry. I mean, to the point that many of the people I talk to every day, the number one thing I'm always concerned with is, are they eating enough? Because many times they're not. Okay, sometimes you just gotta force feed yourself if you're on a carnivore diet because you're just not eating enough. Human microbiomes are highly diverse. Variations in microbial composition may affect flagellin production and TLR5 activation differently across individuals. Now, that's from the study. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, human microbiomes are highly diverse, but they switch based upon the food that you're eating. And so, once you switch to a carnivore diet, it's going to switch to that diet, and that diet's going to affect the amount of PYY you produce. The long-term consequences of modulating this pathway in humans and its potential for safe and effective therapeutic interventions require further clinical research. Definitely. Okay? But there are some practical applications today. While direct clinical interventions targeting the flagellin TLR5 PYY pathway are not yet available, individuals can support their gut-brain communication system through dietary and lifestyle approaches, as we've been talking about. Increasing protein intake remains the most evidence-based strategy. Include protein-rich foods like turkey, chicken, fish, eggs, cheese, and don't include legumes in your meals. Though some people, if you're very much eating that vegetarian diet as much as you can, you're trying to eat ketogenic, You'll eat legumes. Legumes are not a very good source of protein, quite honestly. Okay, you want higher protein foods. Now, if you go back some of my videos on sarcopenia and muscle loss, one of the things we always try to do is get enough leucine along with the protein, which means eating for breakfast, especially like 30 grams of protein, which is a very high protein diet. Okay, including the fat that comes with it. We're not counting fat, but we want 30 grams of protein to make sure you have enough leucine to activate the mTOR function so that you're building muscle. And this is really good, especially if you're over 60, right? Because sarcopenia starts to affect people at 55, 60 years old, right? And you want that to build. Well, guess what? One of the biggest problems with that is I'm telling people, well, eat a hamburger patty and like 4 eggs or something like that to get up to that 30 grams of protein. And the egg yolks are great for leucine. Well, they're telling me they can't because they're just stuffed too early and they can't eat that much. And you almost have to force feed that to yourself, right? And if you've ever spent your life, like I have, on diets, the fact that you have to tell yourself to eat, it's just such a phenomenon. Okay, so take this to heart. Okay, support your gut microbiome health, right? Which may enhance signaling. Now, what you want to do though is remember your microbiome is going to get supported based upon what you're eating. So if you're switching to a carnivore diet, your microbiome will switch to enhance that diet. So ignore the sauerkrauts and the kimchis and the kefirs, right? If you're going to eat anything that's fermented, because I don't think fermenting gets past the stomach anyways, as a general rule. I did talk about the yogurt I make, right? And that yogurt is really good. My kids love it. My wife likes it. It works great. And the biggest problem with eating carnivore, for me, majority of my diet tends to be third-pound hamburger patties, and I eat 3 of them a day. I try to get 1 pound of hamburger per day. That's my normal diet. There's not enough fat in that, and because I try to get that 80-20 type rule of fat, protein and fat. And guess what? Even putting cheese on it doesn't add that much fat because there's plenty of protein in cheese. But having a cup of my yogurt along with my hamburger patties kicks the fat right up because my yogurt's made from half and half, and all the carbs are chewed up by the bacteria well before I eat it because I put it in the fermentation stage for over 24 hours. So keep that in there, right? Don't take antibiotics if possible, right? And don't eat processed foods, right? Especially seed oils. You don't want foods with seed oils like crackers and breads and stuff, okay? And develop sensitivity to your internal hunger cues. Don't eat habitually. Don't eat emotionally. Eat when you're hungry, but look for that hunger. Okay. Stress also is a big thing. Don't have a lot of stress. Try to de-stress your life as much as you can because that will affect your gut microbiome. Okay. So there are some broader implications. The neurobiotic sense may influence multiple aspects of human physiology beyond appetite. We're starting to learn more and more about what's going on with the gut-brain axis and how that affects everything, okay? There's lots of microbial signals to mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety, autism spectrum disorders, and eating disorders. We're finding out more and more about that. And that's where the psychiatric community is just exploding with how ketogenic carnivore diets are helping people with these mental problems. Okay, the vagus nerve is something I've been very interested in recently, last year, because it reaches brain regions involved in mood. And so if you can get something to go up the vagus nerve, it goes right into the brain, and that helps. So if your PYY is going straight at the vagus nerve, just like it does with mice, guess what? That's good. Okay, so keep the protein and keep the high quality fats going. Okay, you want that microbial signals to modulate properly, and your stress responses will affect that. So try to de-stress your life as much as possible. Okay, and this particular study should give plenty of evidence to doctors and researchers that there is some truth into what we've been saying about if you eat carnivore, you're not going to be hungry, and there's lots of mechanistic reasons why, and that's why people are getting healthy eating carnivore. So let's keep that in mind, okay? And don't worry about your gut bacteria. It will adjust to what you're eating. So once again, I don't believe in probiotics. I've got a whole video series on probiotics and why that doesn't work. Eating specific types of fibers. I take a small amount of fibers. That helps. And those of you who watch my videos, I do take 4 different types of algae, which provide a little bit of fiber, which get into the gut, and so those are very healthy. Keep that in mind. Okay, so the core insight here is that it is quite possible that one of the mechanisms that we didn't know about was this PYY axis signaling, right, from the gut. But it makes perfect sense. Now, once again, we don't have human studies yet the way we have mice studies. We have just some smaller human studies that aren't very invasive. So I don't have a true study to say, hey, this proves the connection. But we can see the mechanistic actions take place in mice. We know these mechanistic actions are very similar in humans for these types of functions. We know beyond a shadow of doubt that people who go on a carnivore diet, one of the biggest problems I have with them is that they just don't get hungry and they're not eating enough. And then you have the problem of they start feeling like they don't have enough energy just because they're not eating enough. Okay, and so you got to eat enough high quality protein and very high quality fat. Okay, and make sure you're eating enough. And this gives us evidence of what the mechanisms are now for that. So if you have any questions, let me know. Right, in the comment section, like and subscribe, and check out my group coaching platform, because I have that's becoming active, and you can get a lot more details there. Thank you very much.